In the late 16th and early 17th centuries, the Hungarian landscape was a turbulent domain, a realm where power was often exercised without discernible restraint. It was a time and place that bred stories of extreme actions, tales that whispered of dark deeds behind castle walls. One such unsettling claim pertains to Elizabeth Báthory, a prominent noblewoman connected by blood to the infamous Elizabeth Báthory. The allegation leveled against Báthory suggests a cruelty so profound it borders on the unspeakable, the deliberate boiling of servants alive for amusement. This is not a fictional narrative or an attempt to construct a horror story from historical fragments. It is an investigation into the social structures, legal realities, and fragmented evidence that give rise to such horrific allegations. We will dissect these claims, not to sensationalize, but to understand the stark realities of a period where the lives of the powerful and the powerless were separated by an immense and often brutal chasm. To truly comprehend the environment in which figures like Elizabeth Báthory operated, one must first grasp the fractured state of the Kingdom of Hungary during this tumultuous era. For over a century and a half, Hungary had endured constant fragmentation and conflict, serving as a bitter battleground in the protracted struggle between the formidable Ottoman Empire and the ambitious Habsburg monarchy. The kingdom was not a cohesive entity, it was a land rent into three distinct territories. Central Hungary languished under Ottoman occupation, Royal Hungary, stretching westward, fell under Habsburg dominion, while to the east the Principality of Transylvania maintained a fragile, semi-independent existence. This relentless warfare, marked by shifting allegiances and a central royal authority often too weakened to exert true control, meant that effective power frequently devolved to the high nobility. The magnates, these powerful families commanded vast estates, private armies, and within their sprawling domains they wielded authority that was virtually absolute. This fragmented political reality is not merely background detail, it is the crucial context that enabled the unchecked power and subsequent unchecked behavior that forms the basis of these dark historical accounts. Elizabeth Báthory was born into the very pinnacle of this Hungarian aristocracy. Her lineage was ancient, her family's wealth immense, and their connections intricate. The Báthory name, while not as universally infamous as Báthory, signified a magnate house of considerable standing and influence throughout the kingdom. Her relationship to Elizabeth Báthory, frequently described as a cousin or another close relative, was more than a mere genealogical footnote. It situated Elizabeth within a specific aristocratic milieu from which some of the most disturbing historical accounts of cruelty originated. These interconnected families, bound by strategic intermarriages, consolidated their wealth, landholdings, and political influence across the region, creating powerful, self-sustaining networks. Understanding Elizabeth's family background provides essential insight into the inherited power, the entrenched social standing, and the profound privilege that shaped her entire existence, and crucially, defined the very loose boundaries, or often complete absence thereof, of her authority over her household and vast estates. The noble estate of the 16th century functioned as a self-contained universe, a microcosm of absolute rule. Within its sprawling boundaries, thousands of individuals lived and laboured under the direct command of the lord or lady of the castle. This population encompassed a diverse array of people: tenant farmers, serfs, skilled artisans, and a large complement of domestic servants. The head of the household held supreme authority, not merely dictating agricultural production and economic activity, but also administering justice within their domain. Servants and serfs, though distinct in legal status, shared a fundamental vulnerability. They were bound, either by long-standing tradition, contractual agreement, or simply by birth, to the land or to the noble household. Their recourse against the decisions or actions of their masters was exceptionally limited, often non-existent. Discipline, which routinely included corporal punishment, was a customary and expected aspect of managing such a vast and varied workforce. From a modern perspective, even the accepted forms of domestic control could involve severe physical punishment, arbitrary imprisonment, or forced labor. This framework of virtually unchallenged authority, operating with minimal external oversight, presented an environment where individual cruelty could escalate far beyond any commonly accepted norms, without significant risk of external intervention or consequence. The chilling allegation that a noblewoman, in this specific instance Elizabeth Báthory, deliberately boiled servants alive for amusement, represents an extreme form of cruelty in the historical record of rumour. Such a claim suggests something far beyond harsh or even brutal discipline. It implies an act of prolonged, intentional torture motivated by a desire for sadistic pleasure. It is a graphic and deeply disturbing accusation. When confronted with such claims, a rigorous historical investigation must immediately question the origin of these stories. Do they derive from verifiable contemporary legal documents such as court transcripts, royal decrees, or official testimonies from the period? Or do they primarily surface in later chronicles, sensationalized popular accounts, or within the realm of local folklore, passed down orally and subject to embellishment? For many historical figures from this era, particularly those who are not subject to formal prosecution or major political trials, such extreme accusations rarely come with solid, demonstrably verifiable contemporary documentation. The specific detail of boiling echoes some of the more sensational and often debated charges leveled against Elizabeth Báthory, which raises a critical question: were these specific cruelties accurately attributed to Elizabeth Báthory, circulating narrative of aristocratic depravity and unchecked power, loosely associated with her due to familial connections? Investigating claims of such extreme cruelty from the 16th and 17th centuries presents formidable challenges for any historian. Official records from this period, especially those pertaining to commoners, are often scarce, incomplete, or entirely absent. Documentation within noble households rarely provided detailed accounts of abuses of power against servants, unless such actions escalated into significant political incidents or widespread peasant revolts. When accusations of noble misconduct did emerge, they were frequently recorded by parties with inherent biases, politically motivated rivals seeking to undermine a family's influence, zealous members of the clergy pursuing moral agendas, or later chroniclers who may have relied on hearsay, popular legend, and the desire to create a compelling narrative. The specific, often grotesque nature of allegations like boiling often suggests a complex blend of potential underlying brutality and significant embellishment through folklore, designed to shock and to capture public imagination. In the case of Elizabeth Báthory, concrete, directly verifiable, and contemporaneous evidence that specifically substantiates the boiling claim remains particularly elusive. This forces the historical investigator to shift their focus from definitively proving the specific act itself to understanding why such horrifying stories gained traction, how they circulated, and what they ultimately reveal about the societal anxieties, class dynamics, and the deep-seated fears of that historical period. To truly understand the allegations directed at Elizabeth Báthory, it is necessary to place them within the overarching context of her more infamous relative, Elizabeth Báthory. Báthory, frequently referred to as the Blood Countess, remains the most widely recognized and debated example of alleged noble sadism in Hungarian history. She stands accused of torturing and killing hundreds of young women. While her historical reality is complex and fiercely contested, with some historians positing significant political motivations behind her eventual prosecution, the stories that accumulated around her, including the notorious claims of bathing in the blood of virgins, extensive torture, and widespread murder, indelibly cemented a chilling archetype in the public imagination. These tales, initially spread through rumor and subsequently magnified and embellished by later chroniclers, evolved into a pervasive cautionary narrative about the inherent dangers of unchecked aristocratic power. The sheer existence of Báthory's widespread notoriety created a powerful template. It is therefore plausible that similar horrifying anecdotes, perhaps with less substantiation than even Báthory's debated case, became loosely associated with other powerful noblewomen of the period, particularly close relatives such as Elizabeth Báthory. These associations might be seen as a form of historical echo, a convenient misattribution, or a natural extension of a broader, circulating narrative concerning the depravity of the high nobility. In a society predating mass communication, where information disseminated primarily through word of mouth, personal letters, and the infrequent printed pamphlet, the environment was exceptionally fertile for the propagation of rumor and folklore. This was particularly true when the narratives concerned the immensely powerful and the pervasive injustices experienced by the vulnerable. Stories of cruel lords and ladies, often embellished with sensational details, served multiple significant purposes within these communities. They provided a powerful outlet for articulating popular resentment and long-held grievances against an often oppressive nobility. They functioned as potent warnings to others about the potential dangers lurking within the grand estates. Moreover, they offered a crude but resonant framework through which to comprehend and explain seemingly inexplicable or unpunished suffering. The horrifying details, such as the deliberate boiling of individuals or other forms of extreme torture, ensured that these stories were not only memorable but profoundly impactful, shaping collective consciousness. While some rumors undoubtedly contained kernels of truth, perhaps rooted in documented instances of harsh discipline or isolated abuses, others were almost certainly amplified, distorted, or entirely fabricated, reflecting broad collective anxieties and fears rather than precise historical events. The alleged actions of Elizabeth Báthory must therefore be critically examined within this complex and dynamic landscape of fear, circulating gossip, and the potent symbolic power attributed to the figure of the monstrous noble. The legal system of 16th and 17th century Hungary offered remarkably little in the way of protection to commoners against the arbitrary abuses of powerful nobles. The high nobility frequently enjoyed what amounted to an effective immunity within the bounds of their vast estates, particularly concerning any crimes committed against their own serfs or domestic servants. Royal justice emanating from the distant and often weak central authority was cumbersome, slow, and prohibitively expensive, rendering it largely inaccessible to the lower classes. A noble would typically face formal prosecution only for grave offences against the crown, serious crimes committed against another member of the nobility, or if their actions provoked such widespread unrest that they genuinely threatened the existing social and political order. The very concept of a centralized, impartial justice system, one designed to protect the inherent rights of every individual regardless of their social standing, was still centuries from realization. This fundamental and systemic lack of accountability meant that even if genuine instances of extreme cruelty occurred within the private confines of a noble court, the victims and their families possessed virtually no legal avenues for redress or justice. Consequently, the pervasive silence of official records regarding such abuses often speaks not to their absence in reality, but rather to the inherent powerlessness and voicelessness of those who suffered without means of legal recourse. Accusations of extreme moral depravity leveled against powerful nobles were not always solely rooted in verifiable truth or spontaneous popular outrage. In the intricate and often ruthless political landscape of fragmented Hungary, such claims could be potent weapons. The Habsburg monarchy, constantly engaged in a strategic effort to consolidate its authority over the fiercely independent Hungarian magnates, invariably viewed powerful noble families with deep suspicion. Allegations of treason, heresy, or even profound moral degeneracy could readily provide a convenient pretext for royal intervention. This intervention could lead to the confiscation of vast estates, the discrediting of a rival house, and the systemic weakening of a powerful political base. While the specific circumstances surrounding Elizabeth Báthoryi's life do not indicate that she was the target of a high-profile political prosecution driven by these motives, unlike the situation with her relative Elizabeth Báthory, the broader underlying political climate is highly illustrative. It demonstrates precisely how such dark rumors, even if unsubstantiated by direct evidence, could gain significant traction and circulate within the higher echelons of power. The very possibility of such accusations being exploited for tangible political or economic gain complicates the historical narrative and necessitates an inherently cautious and critical approach to interpreting sensational claims from this period. Beyond the lurid allegations of extreme cruelty, what does the truly available historical record tell us about the actual life of Elizabeth Báthory? While comprehensive biographies are unfortunately scarce, fragments of her existence can be meticulously pieced together from existing property records, the intricate details of marriage contracts, and intermittent references found within family correspondences. These limited but tangible sources typically portray a noblewoman, fully engaged in the expected duties and responsibilities of her high station. This included the complex and demanding management of vast estates, the meticulous oversight of a large household with numerous staff, the upbringing of children, and active participation in the intricate social and political rituals that defined the Hungarian aristocracy of her time. Documented accounts of daily life within noble households, while acknowledging the common and often harsh disciplinary practices prevalent in that era, rarely provide specific details of the extreme sadistic tortures like boiling that are so prominently featured in later folklore. Examining her known activities, as recorded in these more prosaic historical documents, offers a crucial counterpoint to the sensational claims. It allows us to assess how closely her actual, historically substantiated footprint aligns with the monstrous and often exaggerated image that was propagated in subsequent narratives and popular legend. A critical and essential aspect of this historical investigation is the imperative to rigorously differentiate between the brutal, yet often socially accepted forms of discipline prevalent within noble households of the era and the truly sadistic acts alleged. Flogging, various forms of physical confinement, and other physical punishments were commonplace methods for dealing with disobedient, unruly, or underperforming servants. These practices were generally considered within the customary rights and responsibilities of a master or mistress in maintaining order and productivity within their large household. However, claims of prolonged torture, deliberate mutilation, or murder, particularly when alleged to be committed for amusement or personal gratification, moved decisively beyond these accepted disciplinary boundaries and into the realm of profound criminal depravity. The fundamental question for the historian is not whether physical abuse occurred, it is an undeniable fact that it did, but rather whether the specific and extreme forms of torture described, such as the act of boiling, are supported by a body of evidence that can withstand rigorous historical scrutiny. This distinction is vital for accurate historical interpretation, allowing us to avoid romanticizing or excusing general brutality, while simultaneously ensuring that we maintain a clear focus on the demonstrable facts when confronted with exceptional and grotesque allegations. The core mechanism that allowed for the alleged perpetration of extreme cruelties by figures like Elizabeth Báthory lies deeply embedded in the extraordinary and largely unchecked authority that Hungarian magnates exercised within their vast personal domains. Royal authority, severely weakened by prolonged warfare and the endemic fragmentation of the kingdom, rarely extended its reach into the internal affairs of these powerful noble strongholds. There were, in practical terms, few if any formal institutions or accessible legal avenues through which commoners could seek genuine redress against the arbitrary actions or abuses committed by their local lord or lady. This created a profound power vacuum within these estates, where the will of the noble was often paramount, constrained only by their own individual conscience or by the very distant and desperate possibility of a localized peasant revolt, a measure almost universally undertaken only in the direst of circumstances. The pervasive absence of external oversight, combined with a severe lack of accountability, effectively meant that any individual proclivity towards cruelty, however extreme, could be indulged with minimal tangible fear of consequence. This systemic vulnerability of the populace, inherent within the social and legal structures of the time, rather than merely individual pathology, forms the true and most haunting truth embedded within these historical narratives. Why do these particular stories, narratives of noble women boiling servants alive, continue to grip the imagination and evoke profound horror centuries after the fact? Despite their often dubious historical grounding, these tales tap into deep-seated and persistent societal anxieties concerning the dangers of unchecked power, the fundamental injustices of profound class inequality, and the disturbing potential for human depravity. They provide a narrative framework, albeit one often distorted by embellishment, for understanding the profound injustices inherent within feudal systems, even if the specific details are exaggerated or conflated. Such stories also serve as a stark, enduring reminder that the often glamorous and romanticized image of castles, courtly life, and chivalry frequently conceals a far darker and more brutal reality for the vast majority of the population. They explicitly challenge and undermine romanticized notions of history, compelling us to confront uncomfortable truths about historical power dynamics and the systemic vulnerability of the marginalized. Their enduring presence in cultural memory underscores humanity's fascination with horror, but also, and more importantly, the universal and persistent need to acknowledge and condemn injustice, even when the historical record itself is fragmented, obscured by the passage of time, and entangled with myth. Our investigation into Elizabeth Báthory and the specific claim of boiling servants alive leads us to a crucial and nuanced understanding. While the specific, grotesque details of this particular allegation may indeed lack concrete, primary historical substantiation, the underlying societal and political conditions that could have fostered such horrors were undeniably and profoundly present. The fragmented political landscape of 16th and 17th century Hungary, combined with the near-absolute power wielded by the magnates over their vast estates and the almost complete absence of legal recourse for commoners, collectively created an environment where extreme cruelty was not merely a theoretical possibility, but a tragic and often unpunished reality. The enduring stories of figures like Báthory and Báthory serve as powerful, albeit often embellished, historical reflections of a social and legal system that offered precious few safeguards against individual sadism and systemic abuse. The true haunting essence of these narratives lies not in the sensationalized imagery or the unsubstantiated details of torture, but in the grim, demonstrable reality of systemic vulnerability and unchecked power, where human beings were treated as disposable property, their suffering largely invisible to the mechanisms of justice. It is a stark reminder that the most profound horrors in history are often born not from supernatural evil or individual madness alone, but from the unchecked power of real people, operating within societal structures that tragically allowed such atrocities to flourish, atrocities to flourish, atrocities to flourish.